We can show the evidence that if you improve the climate with particular behaviors, the results and the success will follow. It's really important to be focusing on the daily experience of the people, the psychological safety, the engagement, the enabling them to use their creativity, to take risk, etc. All of that stuff we can see has a correlation to organization success based on the research that's been done.
There's the hard infrastructure, and then there's also the soft infrastructure, which often didn't get paid attention to until now. It is like an engine. The softest thing in a car engine is the oil. You ever try to run an engine without oil? Try to run an organization without paying attention to the soft side. And that's what we've been doing for so long. Pay attention to the quality of the oil and the soft systems, communication, relationships, problem solving, decision making, etc. The entity as a whole has a greater chance of survival, growth, and prosperity. All those things we all want.
If you've ever wondered why the same change message inspires one person but overwhelms another, or how understanding different thinking styles can help you build stronger collaboration, greater buy-in, and become a more adaptive leader, then this conversation is for you. Welcome to the Change Leadership Conversations, where we explore how executives, change leaders, and organizations are leading and responding to change in today's ever-changing world. I'm Yvonne Ruke Akpoveta, Executive Change Advisor and founder of the Change Leadership. At the Change Leadership, we create change leadership workshops, conferences, courses, and community to equip professionals and organizations to lead change. In this episode, I'm joined by Samantha Stead and Brian Dorval, co-founders of Better Change Tools. Together, we explore why understanding how people think, solve problems, and respond to change may be one of the most important leadership skills of our time. Don't forget to hit the follow button and stay connected with our global community of change leaders. Hi, Sam. Hi, Brian. Really great to have you join us today. I'm looking forward to an awesome conversations. We've had prior conversations, and I said, you know what? I have to have both of you on the podcast so we can talk about leading change with better tools. You've spent decades helping professionals, leaders, organizations to lead change and problem solve. Everyone runs away from problems, but you're helping people solve problems. Tell us, how did you get started down that path? And was there a defining moment that made you say, hey, we have to do this?
I've been doing this for a few decades, as you mentioned, but it started for me as I was studying undergraduate in Rhode Island. My first university I went to was a focus on civil engineering, which is about things and building things. And then I went to another university with a focus in industrial design, which is how people interact with things. And then I did some professional testing where I took some tests to learn more about me, which were very intriguing. And then it pointed me to psychology. And so that was the third university I went to, which was about people, right? So these are all in Rhode Island. So I was checking them all out. So I started studying people because I really was interested in basically what makes people tick. How do they think? How do they problem solve? I was also an athlete, so I had some experiences with thinking and problem solving on tennis courts as well. And then when I graduated with an undergraduate degree in psychology, I realized I wanted to help people, but kind of help people who are already healthy. And I think about this program that looked at creativity, which is all about how people think and solve problems to produce things and outcomes. And so all of a sudden, I went from thinking about things to how people interact with things to how people ticked, and then how it all comes together in the form of creativity and problem solving. That was the quick journey, but the critical events were being tested myself to help me understand myself better, and then a strong interest in trying to help others be at their best when they engaged in problem solving, whether it's on a tennis court or inside organizations.
And Samantha, what about you?
I'll probably fast forward a bit from Brian's time frame. So we actually first met close to 30 years ago now in Spain. I was working for an international direct-to-consumer publishing company, and I was working in product development. And we were all sent to Spain to do some training in creative problem solving. And I'll be honest, I never wanted to go to this training because there was a department in the company. They used to do new concept development, and they would all swan around and call themselves the creative part of the company. everything was blue sky and chaos. And I thought, I don't need to be taught how to be like them. But anyway, I had to go because we all had to go. And really, it was a massive eye opener and a game changer, really, because one of the hallmarks of the course, in fact, we still teach this course today at Better Change Tools. One of the hallmarks is that you work through a real business problem for you. And all of a sudden, I realized that the way in which we prefer to think about solving problems helps us put deliberate processes in place to help us do that better, right? Solve problems better. It really was a game changer because then I came back and a few colleagues came back, and between us, we decided we were going to champion this thing and became a leader of it inside the organization. And we had some really big impact as a result. And so that's what led me to understand that the way we think and prefer to think has a massive impact on how we solve problems, and that you can learn to facilitate processes that help manage that and get the best from that. So that's really where I started out.
I love that. And one of the things that I love about that story that you just shared is you never wanted to go for this training. You went for this training and voila, your path completely changed.
Some things are meant to be, right?
Some things are meant to be. Regardless of sometimes the path we take, we still get to the final destination. Fingers crossed and hopefully. One of the things that attracted me to yourselves in terms of the work that you do was just even the name, Better Tools. I'm a believer in tools. I have taken different types of assessments, used different types of tools, helped organizations with equipping them with different tools. Just having that toolbox is really important. And what I appreciate about the work that you do is that you give leaders or change leaders as well practical tools to better understand themselves and others. And one of the things that I love to say all the time is that leading change starts with self. Tell me a little bit about how your tool view, which I experienced, but I'll let you talk about it. Tell me how that helps when it comes to equipping leaders with better tools.
If you think about tools in general for a moment, what is the purpose of a tool? As we know, it's really designed to help us extend our reach, right? Telescopes help us see farther, microscopes help us see smaller. And so tools for leaders are really designed to help us better understand ourselves, as well as to help us change our behaviors in our decisions, the way we respond to different situations beyond what we might naturally do ourselves. I like tools because they extend our reach and they enable us to be more effective in a wider range of situations, maybe beyond our own comfort zones and the ones that we're familiar with. In general, that's the reason we like tools, is because they really help us move beyond what we can already do to the level that we can currently do it.
That's where view comes in, right? So this tool or assessment, it's called view, an assessment of problem solving style. And that's really its anchor and its focus is problem solving. And so if you think about it, all life, in fact, I think it was the philosopher Karl Popper that said this, all life is problem solving. There's always a gap between where we are and where we want to be, right? And when we solve problems in business and when we're leading others and working with others, we're really always actually solving two problems at once, right? One is the problem itself that we've come together to solve. And the other is the problem of how we're going to lead and work with others to solve those problems more effectively. How can we work better together? We'll dive more into this, I'm sure. But the beauty of view is that it gives us a real lens into that. How can we solve problems more effectively together for the betterment of ourselves and the betterment of whoever it is, the business that we're working with?
So it's like those two things together where I may do things naturally in solving problems, but sometimes when we're doing things so naturally, it's back to that unconscious competence thing, right? And so we don't really kind of know we're doing it that way. So we can shed some light on what's actually happening naturally. It gives me a better sense using a tool. What is my starting place? And then what I might do differently as a result, again, to solve problems in ways that are maybe consistent to the way I naturally want to do them, but also maybe change my approach to problem solving to better fit a different situation, a different need.
When I hear that, I'm thinking adaptive change leadership. Again, another thing I'm big on, especially in today's business environment, today's uncertainty. There's so much to do with needing to adapt our styles, the way we do things. But everything starts with knowing ourselves, right? To know who are we as leaders, who are we as individuals, and to what you said, Brian, understanding the strengths and what we bring to the table, because sometimes it's subconscious, it's unconscious. We don't fully realize what our strengths may be. And on the flip side, we sometimes just don't understand what our weaknesses may be.
Weaknesses? Who has weaknesses? Understand that.
And that's one of the things that I love about assessments. It helps us be better leaders and better change leaders when we better understand ourselves and understand the situation and lean into being able to adapt our style to that situation that is taking place. One of the concepts that stood out for me when I experienced your tool, which was the view, was that distinction between explorer and developers. And we're going to talk about the different concepts within the view because I feel there's a lot to unpack in there in terms of using it as a tool. Was between explorer, like I said, and developer, how does understanding those differences matter when it comes to leading change?
Yvonne, you're right. There are actually like three different dimensions to view that we can unpack. And one of them is actually called orientation to change, preferences for how they respond to you and how they prefer to lead change as well. Explorers and developers, there's a lot of nuance, but in a nutshell, if you think about that, explorers are people whose preferences are for thinking big picture strategically. They like novelty that's outside of the box, the status quo, right? They're a bit inhibited when it comes to rules and structures and so on and so forth. They like to do things differently from how we do them today. And then developers, their preference is for doing things better than we do them today, right? How do we improve what already exists? How do we polish things, make them hum, produce more efficiency, all of those kinds of things? And they get energy from working through the details and so on. And when it comes to structure, they're enabled by structure. They want to clarify people, resources, time, budget, all that kind of thing. And then you have some people in the middle who are more situational, if you like, right? Depending on the situation, they'll judge which way to go. So as a leader in particular, it really helps for you to be aware of where your preferences are, and then the preferences of those around you, also the nature of the change the business needs at any given time. Let's say, for example, perhaps your preference as a leader is to be more a bit on the explorer side, and you're working with a group of people and leading them, and their preferences are more on the developer side, but the need you have in the moment is to upend everything and create a radical new vision, right? The developers, by their nature, are going to be outside of their comfort zone on working on a problem like that. It doesn't mean they're not able, because view is a style measure. It doesn't have anything to do with ability and ability to, but they'll naturally be coping working on something like that. Whereas if the issue that you're dealing with is creating a detailed implementation plan for something, then the developers are really going to be in their comfort zone, right? And then you can leverage where their natural preferences are to make that process go a lot easier. If people are outside of their comfort zone, you can bring in others to cover, or there are a whole bunch of creative problem solving tools that you can use that help people flex their thinking. So that's really why an understanding of whether you're on the explorer side or the developer side in relation to who you're leading and the change the business needs at any given moment can be really helpful in navigating change and helping others to do the same.
In today's environment, it's all about speed. It's all about disruption. It's all about uncertainty. It's almost all about thinking outside of the box. And that's the pace we're constantly thinking about, especially with when you think something AI that is in quotes novel, right? When I say novel, it's been around for years, but it's big now. When we think about how disruptive the changes that we're experiencing, how does somebody who is leading a set of developers what's the practical way they can help them navigate that uncertainty, that disruption where, look, there's no structure here. We're coloring outside the box and we need to do this in this way. How do you help navigate people who have a preference for that structure to work within?
That's a really good question because it's so much of it comes down to how we as leaders position things, right? It relates a little bit to communication and all those kinds of things in relationship to how we talk about the change. So, for example, if we talk about a change that is about disruption and a fundamental new paradigm, et cetera, and we need big picture thinking, that's going to attract some people, probably more on the explorer side, because that's where they live, that's where they love. And developers might find that a bit stressing. If we talk about this, AI is coming in, but you know what? It's going to be a pretty significant incremental shift to the way we do things. It's going to have big implications, but it's really a shift. It's taking the existing things we do and optimizing them like crazy, right? So that's more of a developer thing, right? And they like the continuous improvement, making things and optimizing them, et cetera. So we can talk about that change and position it in a way that resonates with who we're talking to. And if we know we're talking to a full range of preferences in the group, you want to talk about the big picture opportunities and the incremental change necessary to pull it off. So you can actually convey messages in a way that resonate with the people you're talking to. So for developers, the way to get them engaged in this is to see it's a disruption. But there are ways, if we break that disruption down into pieces and put it into a bit of structure, they'll get excited about that because they love structure. For the explorer, that disruption, we need a big vision for how it's going to go and then a strategy to pull it off. Explorers are going to love that. So it's what part of the message do we send? For example, the light bulb was a major disruption to the way we lived, right? But Edison made an incremental tweak to make that light bulb part of our world, right? He made the filament that made the light bulb work. But that developer-oriented change had a massive disruption to the way humans live their lives in general living. How do we want to talk about it? And how do we talk about it in a way that resonates to the people we're talking to? That to me is the leadership question.
Okay, let me be the one that puts a little bit of spanner in the whole work. Train the spanner there. It feels hard sometimes as a change leader having to constantly adapt your style because you want to take that message and just share it. Now you're thinking about the different audiences, the different ways you can influence. So would it be correct to say that understanding our styles and understanding the styles of our audiences are really critical, and the work that it is that we need to do if we want to see the kind of results that matter?
Yeah, I certainly believe so, right? Because otherwise it's like you're flying blind, really. And so we have an example actually of where and you have a very similar one, of where we had a leader who, in fact, back to your question about structure, who was more on the explorer side, leading a group of developers. And they actually were having to create marketing campaigns. And these marketing campaigns weren't being all that successful. And this new leader comes in and at this point doesn't know anything about preferences or anything like that. And he's like, you know what? You need to focus on customer needs, right? Not on the product features, etc. And so, because they had been so focused on the detail of the product, they hadn't really thought bigger picture about the customer and the motivations and the benefits and so on. But that's all he said. And then he went away and left them to it and expected them to just know how to do what he was asking them to do. Just change your whole approach and it will be more successful. And of course, they earnestly wanted to do it and tried to do it, but it still wasn't working. And we did view with this team, and all of a sudden he had this huge aha moment, because when we looked at the team profile, we could see that he was significantly different in his preferences that he was leading. And by knowing that, he was very willing to engage in this. We said, this team really needs more clarity and more direction. And he'd been much more to tell them what the outcome is and then let them figure it out. But in fact, he realized he had to flex and he had to give them more direction about exactly what he needed and what he wanted and put some structures in place so they really knew what success looked like. And when he did that, all of a sudden they were able to produce what he needed to produce, and the campaign performance went up as a result. But it was that moment of seeing the difference in our preferences. And when I'm acting in my natural way with my natural preference, it's not necessarily serving the needs of the others on my team. And so as a leader, it's hard because that's the adaptive leadership, that's the flexing. But that's what was necessary in that particular situation. And that's why understanding really helped.
And when we think about uncertainty, which is again the world we're facing, right? Would it be fair to say, or even unfair to say, that one thrives more in this environment than the other? Explorers thrive more than developers, or maybe both are needed?
It's a good question because we know, for example, the developer really appreciates clarity. And we know the explorer appreciates challenging existing paradigms. So they have a different lens on things like problem definition and the way they like to approach things. But if the big picture is unclear or uncertain to the explorer, they're going to get frustrated because they like to have big picture. And if there isn't one, that's going to get them going. Like to have clarity around structure and detail and framing. And if that's not clear, they're going to get antsy. So it really often depends on the nature of what's unclear and how to resonate with the way they prefer to have things served up, we say, or created for them in relationship to change, implementation, problem definition, whatever it might be. So different folks have a different sense. It's like risk taking. What might be risky to you may not be risky to me. There's a bit of a subjectivity to it, depending on what we're talking about. And certain topics are okay with risks, and other topics, no risk on that, thank you. So it really comes down to, like you were saying, leaders do need to think about a lot of stuff. That's why leading is such an important and a challenging thing to do, to influence others. I have to know them. I have to know what the opportunity is that the organization needs from us. I have to know something about the context that we're in and the pressures and the strategies related to it, and things like urgency and priority. There's quite a few variables that you're right. We're constantly needing to pay attention to, diagnose, assess, and then choose the best way into that from an influencing standpoint.
And that's what I love about tools. Tools give us a quick way and a fast way to learn about ourselves and learn about our audience. Without tools, you're taking that much time to figure the team out, figure your style out. You're butting heads. You're not sure why this is working, why that's not working. But when you have tools like View, it's very quick. One of the tools I personally use and teach with my clients is the head, the heart, and the hand. What's your style? And that way, you understand what your style is when it comes to leading change. You know how to adapt your style when you understand your audience's style when it comes to leading change. And again, when I think back to leading change, for me, I can deal with ambiguity. I lean a little bit more to that explorer side. I can deal with uncertainty. And it's easy for me to get frustrated when I forget that the audience that I may be working with don't deal with ambiguity that easy, don't deal with uncertainty that easy. And as opposed to me interpreting it as resistance to change, if I understood their styles, then I'm better able to influence how they receive that change. That is what I love about tools. One of the aspects we have when we look at your tools, such as View, is internal versus external processing. Tell us a little bit more about what that means.
So preferences for processing, this correlates actually to some degree with the Myers-Briggs assessment, introversion and extroversion, and we have internal and external. But Myers-Briggs is much deeper, more about personality. View is more about problem solving, right? Practical lens on that. So internal and external is about where you get your energy from, and then problem-solving context, when do you prefer to share your thinking with others? What status is it in? And when do you prefer to take action? On the external side, it's all about energy from outside, the world around you. You love to problem solve by sharing your thinking and debate with others and so on. And when it comes to action, you want to get going quickly, typically. Sometimes trading off the time for consideration and reflection and weighing the consequences. Whereas the internal, they like to process their information, get their energy internally. They will want to stop and reflect and consider and package things and share their thinking when it's already fully formed and packaged with others. And they take their time before they act because they want to consider this. And the watch out for them is sometimes the moment to act can pass you by, right? If you don't jump quickly enough. And it's interesting when these two people with these two preferences work together, because we've seen this in teams and organizations a lot. It can be a real cause of friction. They don't necessarily take the time to announce what the status of their thinking is before they try to share it with the others. So it's a bit like baking bread, right? If you think about baking bread like thinking, so externals, they like to be in the kitchen, they just bring ingredients, they like to be there together and bake the bread together. The internals, they like to go off in the kitchen on their own and they emerge with this fully baked loaf, right? But when you bring the two together, it's tricky because an internal is going to expect an external to come with a fully baked loaf, but they don't. They come with what the internal perceives as half-baked thinking. And by the way, they're just going to rush off and implement it without stopping to think. And on the other hand, the external is going to expect the internal to come with a bunch of ingredients to play around with. And then everyone gets upset when the external tries to pull it apart. And by the way, that internal is slowing things down, right? So all of this causes tension, which can be resolved really simply, actually.
I was going to ask, how does that understanding of the differences, saying that they're externals versus internal, how does that play when it comes to leading change? And how can that understanding make us better leaders, really?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, as humans, we tend to think about our preference being the right preference, judge everybody else compared to our own preference. So very often you will find that a leader who's leading change might be bringing everybody together in a meeting. And let's say the leader is an external, right? They're going to probably run this meeting where everybody's talking or brainstorming or whatever out loud together. And internals are going to be sitting there more likely to be listening, processing, whatever. There's a danger sometimes that the external leader can perceive the internal as not being fully engaged because there and talking, all right? And again, the danger that the internal is sitting there thinking, this is just, the quality of this thinking is just not good. It's not thought through. So if it's an internal leader listening to externals, and the implications are that you need to think about the process that you're using and help, if you like, facilitate a process or design a process where everybody's voices and contributions can be heard more effectively. So for an internal, they might be more enabled by, and this is good meeting practice anyway, right? Knowing what we're going to talk about and the agenda beforehand, so they can do some preparation before and come in ready to share. And by the way, externals too. And then in the meeting, just structure the process so that we give everybody an opportunity to share in turn, for an example, rather than just all having at it. And then also time after the meeting where people can go away and process and come back with incubated thoughts. So, great meeting, we've got a preliminary decision, let's go away and just spend a couple of hours thinking this through. If you've anything else to add, let's add it into the mix. Otherwise, let's consider we've made this decision and we'll move forward. But just giving that extra bit of incubation time as well for the internals there after the moment. So that before, during and after, that can really help when you're leading through change.
I like the simplicity of amending or adapting your style to even setting up a meeting, right? Let's provide some more information beforehand. Let's give more time for decision making. And sometimes it's the simple things
Yes.
But what is interesting is how some people may think, oh, why do we need meeting notes? Or why do we need an agenda? Let's go with the flow. Let's just jump into it. And the minute you ask, can we get an agenda before this meeting? They can think about you as too much or too this. There was a quote you shared with me that I really love, and I'm going to let you share it and the origin of it and talk about it, is that people easily see differences as less than.
Yes.
Because this person is different from me, because this person needs meeting notes or an agenda, because they need me to slow down, they must be less. They're not on board with things. They can't move quickly with the change, and they make all kinds of judgments about the other person, as opposed to how do we accommodate the person.
Totally. Yeah, we love that quote, difference is less than. It comes from actually someone called Michael Curtin, who's an organizational psychologist in the UK. He's passed away now, but difference is less than. If you are different from me, you are less than me. And that's the way it's almost natural for human beings to think that way. It's been ingrained with us from the get-go. But when we think about change, we know that we need this diversity of preference to play out if we're really going to have successful change. The kind of change that shakes things up. You need the kind of change that polishes and improves things. You need the people who are going to take action. You need the people who are going to consider and reflect, right? You need all of that to play out. So for us, view is really about how can we turn that quote on its head and move from difference is less than, to how can we think about and change our mindset so that difference is actually opportunity. Right.
Long-term survival, growth, prosperity requires it. It really does.
And when I hear what it is that you're saying, it reminds me of the value and the need for creating that safe space, that psychologically safe environment. Once you understand that we're all different in the way that it is that we work, in the way that is we respond to change, in the way that is that we lead change, in the way that we process things, whether internally or externally, or as an explorer or as a developer, creating that safe space or environment for people to be able to say, hey, can you give me a few more minutes to think about this? And they're not going to feel judged to say, why can't you just make a decision now? Why do you need a few minutes? Why do you need time to look at the documents? We need to move very fast. Sometimes I say we can move so fast that by the time we get to the end, we realize we're at the edge of the hill and there's nowhere to go. So sometimes you have to appreciate those people that can say, hold on for a second, let's assess what's in front of us. And we need both when it comes to how we lead change in today's environment that is so uncertain, moving so quickly. We need to bring in a little bit of stability in sometimes how we think through our decisions.
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes we have to stop ourselves thinking so much that we don't actually get it done. I love when we were at your conference, you talking about your wonderful book and how just getting it out there needed to happen rather than everything being perfect at the beginning. It's time to put later on, but we need both. You're absolutely right.
And having both brings a certain balance that we need. And also it helps for team building and structuring, right? That when you look at a team, it's not always about having all of the explorers. It's not always about having all of the developers. It's always about having a mix, because that's what makes room for, like you say, like creative problem solving, when we can all come together and leverage those differences to be able to make better decisions. Another concept which I loved when I was looking at View and looking at the tools that you have was person versus task. Person versus task. Share with us a little bit about that, and then I will ask you that question that was really at the back of my mind when I was listening to the differences between person versus task.
It's kind of one of the places where the rubber hits the road when it comes to change, and right, it's we have to make decisions and do things. And so person task is about the preferences people have for the ways they like to make those decisions. What do they pay attention to? What do they prioritize? Person is the priority in their mind when they make a decision. By the way, a decision can be a really big one, like what strategy we're going to go after for the organization, or it could be a tiny thing like what am I going to say when someone shares an idea with me? What words am I going to use in my response? Where are we going to go to lunch? So it's a wide range of decision making around change. And if you're person focused, then what you're paying attention to, you're prioritizing is harmony in the relationships and the impact that my decision will have on other people, because I want to maintain harmonious relationships, right? And if it's a task focus decider, what they're paying attention to is the quality of the outcome of the decision and the results that will be produced by the decision. So one's thinking about quality of results and outcomes, the other one's thinking about harmony in relationships. About change, right? The best case scenario around change is we want really good thinking that people adopt and do. That's how change happens.
Yes.
So we need back to it's a yes and, as so many things are in change and creativity, innovation, and all those kinds of things, is we need to be thinking about how people are going to relate and resonate with the changes, but we also need to make sure it's high quality stuff.
Yes.
So we need people naturally paying attention to both, but not any one person might pay attention to that full spectrum of things we could think about. And so the benefit is back to the diversity of minds operating in the situation to making sure we're paying attention to producing high quality thinking and results that also people are going to buy in and accept. Tend to find when you get it as you move up organizations, you tend to find people in those positions that tend to have more of a task orientation to them, task focused deciders. Myers-Briggs found that. We find that with you. And so sometimes they'll focus so heavily on producing really good outcomes, which is great. We need that. But the watch out is they can burn out the people and the environment, right? They're trying to push too much too quickly. And so sometimes we have to be ready to pay more attention to how are people going to receive this? What are the implications for the people and the environment, the working environment? Is it still going to be psychologically safe? Are people going to be able to absorb it, adopt it, etc.? So we find ourselves sometimes helping leadership teams pay attention to a balanced approach to making decisions.
In your experience, where do you tend to find leaders focus more on? Is it that results-driven outcome approach, or is it the people side of things? What's been your experience?
As we go up in the organizations, as we find more senior folks, they tend to, not because of ability, but because of preference, take on roles where the major emphasis is outcomes and objectives and KPIs and deliverables and all those things. So by their nature, they get attracted to jobs that require that. So people have task-oriented preferences, find themselves in positions that have outcome-based to them as the priority. Up in senior level positions, that's often been the case. That's what we're focused, deliverables and results. So we tend to task orientation in those kinds of roles. But a lot of the world of change management, what's been the focus around change management and change leadership? Getting people to buy into stuff.
It tends to be more about people. And there's this debate that I have seen for myself where people feel sometimes it has to be one or the other when it comes to human-centered leadership or results-driven leadership. Even when I've done something as simple as the head, heart, and hand assessment for people, where leaders tend to be more head, very results-driven, and then you find a few people tend to be more heart, people-centered kind of leadership, and the change managers you find easily are very human-centered, HR people very human-centered. And there could be that debate where it has to be either or. And sometimes it doesn't have to be either or. Two things can be true at the same time.
Absolutely.
You need the human-centered approach, but you also need to be results-driven. Let's explore that a little bit, why both are beneficial.
As we mentioned a bit, where if we're going to make change, organizations need to survive and thrive and grow, and they need to deliver results and produce revenue. And the lifeblood of an organization is the finances, right? We have to have that. It's important and necessary for long-term survival and growth. But organizations are also made up of people, right? And so it's the people doing that. So if we disengage the people to try to get to those results, we're like, wait a minute, it's not going to happen, right? It has to be both because organizations are both. And the watch out sometimes is one of those gets more attention than the other. Once we do that, when people, for example, become part of the machine and they become depersonalized, right? They're just there because we want this. When it takes on that role, that's when we start to have problems with engagement, buy-in, etc. So if we overemphasize the money, that's the watch out. If we overemphasize the people and we don't pay attention to the money and the outcomes and deliverables, the company is also at risk, right?
People have no jobs.
So an attention on both. But as human beings, we don't naturally do that. We tend to have our own preferences for where our minds go first. We need each other.
Yes.
Diversity for the sake of diversity, it's survival and growth of everybody. Better together than we do on our own. That's why we organize.
Do you ever experience challenges with having to get one group to understand the need for a certain style more than the others? Maybe having senior leaders understand why a human-centered approach to leading change is just as important as a results-driven approach to leading change.
A little bit. There's one, I'll bring it up if you.
Okay.
What we find sometimes, and Sam might give the other side of this too, is that to help task-oriented deciders understand the importance of paying attention to the people side, is we find it sometimes helpful to make people part of the task because that's where their mind goes, right? By their nature. That's what helps us make better quality decisions. But the risk is we're not paying attention to people. So to help them pay attention to the people side, we have to make people part of the task in a way.
Explain that. I need a practical example to see how you can make people part of the task.
It's how do we link people to the bottom line?
Okay.
How do we link people to skills and talents, those things that actually deliver the outcomes people are asking for? Results they want, decisions. If we can show them where those come from, which is human beings, then
Yes.
you make the person a necessary condition to get what they want.
Yes.
Outcomes.
Yes.
This is another part of our work, actually, is the climate side, what people experience every day. And we can show the evidence that if you improve the climate with particular behaviors, the results and the success will follow. We have that kind of data. And so that is one of the areas where we can show it's really important to be focusing on the daily experience of the people, the psychological safety, the engagement, the enabling them to use their creativity, to take risk, etc. All of that stuff we can see has a correlation to organization success based on the research that's been done. And that sometimes is okay, and aha, we really actually need to pay attention to that.
If you think about it, there's the hard infrastructure, and then there's also the soft infrastructure, which often didn't get paid attention to until now the work you're doing and others to really pay attention to it. It is like an engine. The softest thing in a car engine is the oil. You ever try to run an engine without oil?
Exactly.
It seizes up like that. So try to run an organization without paying attention to the soft side. And that's what we've been doing for so long.
Great analogy.
It's kind of neat, right? And
Yes.
you start paying attention to the quality of the oil and the soft systems, communication, relationships, problem solving, decision making, etc. The entity as a whole has a greater chance of survival, growth, and prosperity. All those things we all want.
Yes. And that's why it's important for us, even as change leaders or even change managers or working with senior leaders, to be able to explain to them why some of this, in quotes, soft side power skills, human-centered approach to leading change matter. Because traditionally, leadership has not always been like that. Leadership has always been very outcome driven, very results driven, very numbers driven, very quantitative. And we as change leaders or even change managers working to coach leaders through a change need to be able to take off that hat that we may have and that bias to say, oh, they need to know this, oh, they need to be more like this, and help those leaders understand the value of leading with a more human-centered approach and putting the people, like you say so well, in the task. Help them understand that empathy is not just a soft skill, but if you lead with cognitive empathy, you're able to get more buy-in. John Maxwell says it better. First of all, you have to connect with the hearts of people in order to be able to get their support, to be able to move through that very change that you want them to move through. Because without people doing the work, it's not going to get done.
I love that phrase, cognitive empathy,
Yeah.
right? Because that's what View is all about. It's about cognitive preference and empathy, right? For
And
where we're coming from and understanding, and how we then all work together to help everyone be at their best and the organization to be at its best.
And we know ultimately that organization has those basic four ingredients, right? It is designed to produce outcomes, but it's people doing it using whatever methods they have available and they're supposed to use in some kind of an environment. And the real change has to pay attention to all four of those.
Yes.
It's almost like system centric. It's the whole
Systems thinking,
holistic thinking, all of those. It goes back to your original point around leaders need to think of a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Reminded of that quote or phrase that used to be said, and I don't know that I hear anybody saying it anymore, so it may not even be politically correct, that says, uneasy lies the head that wears the crown. And as leaders, we are in a position where it's a responsibility, it's a place of service, there's more demands of us, it's more work. With that title, to be able to do more and be more, and the expectation is higher of that leader, and it's on us to understand what it means to adapt our styles when it comes to leading change. I always say change managers, change leaders, the responsibility is on us to ensure that the receiver gets that message as intended. Because sometimes you say, oh, I sent an email, oh, we had a town hall, oh, we did this. And it's putting the responsibility on them. They should have seen the email, or they should have gotten the memo, or they heard the announcement. And all of this we've discussed, and then the tools you talk about help us understand that we're different and we have to tailor our styles in terms of meeting the needs of our stakeholders. As great as tools can be, every good thing, just like that cake I saw the other day, as lovely and tasty as that cake was, it had its little side effects, more calories. When it comes to tools, what do you see as one of the mistakes that individuals or leaders or organizations make when leveraging tools such as assessment tools?
For me, I think people have a tendency, just because it's easier and makes life simple, to put people in a box, right? So you take an assessment, you get a label, and you're like, now I'm this, and now I'm expected to act a certain way. And that's not really how it plays out in life, right? In life, actually, so much depends on who you're with, what it is you're working on, all sorts of other things that might be going on in your environment at any given moment. And so you might have a preference, right? And your preference is with you wherever you are, but how you flex and behave is also really important. We all need to, going back to, adapt and adjust according to who we're with and the business need. But we sometimes see people who say, I'm an explorer. It's perfectly okay if I'm late for a meeting because I'm an explorer. Or it's perfectly okay if I'm an internal, I bake my bread inside. And so, no, it doesn't matter that I haven't, right? And so sometimes people can almost use it as an excuse or just label others that way. And one of the things we like to teach when we use View, and what we like about View, is the sort of socially relevant piece. I can have a certain preference and be with a certain group of people. I might be slightly more explorer with a group of much stronger explorers. I'm actually the person who's going to bring more of the developer thinking into that mix. Or I could be with a group of developers and be bringing more, I might be a developer, but I might be bringing more of the explorer thinking into the mix, depending on where I am compared to others. So we all have a social responsibility and a social role to play.
To build on that, if boxing is one watch out, I think it becomes even more of a potential watch out is when the box gets a value judgment.
Yes.
Where an organization or a group can create a bias towards a particular style. And so let's say in this world, the developer style is it. They're the ones, that's the one that's most valued by the group. And the explorers, they're loose cannons and they get judged as less appropriate, effective, helpful, etc. And so when that judgment starts to take place, it disables the diversity need that we have around how we think and solve problems, right? And all of a sudden I start to judge that difference is less than turns into a bias in the group or the organization. And then we make less effective decisions. We treat each other differently. The difference is less than becomes the driving force behind a lot of things. We see it on the world stage a lot, unfortunately, right now. But when that bias kicks in, it disables so many things, including the moral imperative to help everybody be able to contribute.
Yes.
And which is part of that leadership responsibility that we share. And so it turns into a bias. It can have horribly
can go horribly wrong, right? I'm sure you do this as well. One of the things that I find myself doing when I'm using any tool, like either the Everything Disc or even the Head, Heart, and Hand model, is the pre-discussions I have with the clients, the briefing sessions prior to using the tool to help them understand how best to use it, to show them one is not better than the other. And it's all about understanding so that it helps drive better team dynamics. Because like you said, it's easy for people to create that bias to think, oh, I'm this, so this works much better. It's helping them to understand it's in the differences that we can achieve more, and one is not better than the other.
Exactly.
So helping prevent those biases before people get their results and wear it as a badge of honor.
Right? Yeah, totally. That's an important thing also with the use of the tools themselves, is to make sure that what the tool is measuring has clarity to it. So for example, view doesn't correlate with ability. So it doesn't relate to someone being better or worse at something. Where an ability measure, like a strengths finder, for example, that is, I assume, correlated with ability because it's about how much ability do you have. So we have to know what assessments we're using too to help us understand, is it an ability thing? Is it a preference thing? And then how do we use that to our advantage to improve understanding, increase our depth of knowledge and our ability to respond to different situations?
And tools could also be good for measurement of growth or determining roles, because as an individual contributor, you take something like the view or do an assessment, that's your paradigm and that's how you do things at that point in time. So there's some profiles that are better suited for certain types of jobs. And when you change roles, when you're in more leadership roles, when you're leading more people, after a point in time, you may find your style start to change, right? Because your requirements as a leader or the expectations from you change. It's no longer about being that individual contributor. You have to look at things differently. Saying that, do you find that there is a certain type of profile that is more suited to leaders or change leaders?
It's a great question. When it comes to view, you're going to find developer-oriented leaders, internal, task, explorer. Everyone will have it's more about the way they lead, maybe, but choosing to lead, because think about leaders. It's a style independent thing. How that will play out.
So is it fair to say that even though this tool may reveal your style, it's how you use that information to say, as a change leader, you now have to be able to be more fluid through the range of how you up your style when it comes to leading change?
You got it. Absolutely.
Very much. It's all about the application. And we do see assessments getting used sometimes where, great, there's this assessment and everyone takes it and then it goes away and lives in a drawer and nobody does anything with it, right? We've seen that happen and play out quite often as well. But how you apply it to how you lead and how you help others bring their strengths and preferences to the surface, that's sort of style independent in a sense, right? It is having that knowledge, fluidity, adaptability to be able to understand yourself and others and bring it to bear.
That's the key, if I can build on that. From our lens on the tools, like with View, what changes over time is the person's behavior, because they've learned, like you said, they get skills, they have experiences that teach them how to adjust their behavior more widely to meet the changing demands of different situations. But what doesn't change is their natural preference for the way they would prefer to do it. So I have my natural preference, but I have learned that in this scenario, I need to do it like this. And in that scenario, do it like that. So my behavior changes over time because of learning skills, expertise, but the preference remains stable.
The preference is always stable in terms of the way they do things. This has really been an enlightening discussion. One of the questions I love to end with all of my guests is this. We're facing unprecedented change. Some people may say it's not unprecedented. It's all relative, right? But in a time such as this, driven by AI, shifting workplace requirements, economic uncertainty, global disruption, personally, how are each of you navigating this season of change?
For me, when things are all moving like that, the ground is moving. For me, the thing I try to focus on mostly is the thing I can manage, which is my own frame of mind.
Yes.
In how I navigate all the movements, right? So the one thing I can manage is that frame of mind. So I keep my attention on what I can control, my own process, my own approach to dealing with it, to staying attentive to what's going on and in ways, and then thinking about how I choose to respond rather than react. So I try to keep response mode rather than a reaction mode, which that's the difference sometimes between my natural preference and what I need to do in the situation, because they're not always the same. Rather than reacting, which is often a preference thing, it's responding, which is an intellectual intentional.
Yes, I like that. It's like it could be a whole different topic talking about how tools such as the view, it can help you be more intentional about not reacting in your natural way, but instead responding to the situation in a way that is required of that situation, that situational leadership and adaptive style leadership approach. And I love what you said about we can't control everything that is happening to us, but we can definitely control how we respond to what's happening to us. Love that. Sam, what about you? How are you navigating this season of change?
For me, there's so much going on out there. It's trying to keep focus. It's really about continual learning and growing as best you can. For me, that means taking time to read and reflect and also connect with others, particularly others who have shared values and where we can support one another through the journey, which I think is one of the things actually that drew us to you. It's why we were so appreciated being able to be part of your Change Leadership Conference back in May. And then for me, going away and reading and learning and getting insights and different perspectives from your book, Anatomy of a Change Leader, right? All of that, learning, growing, connecting, I think is what helps us all help one another navigate.
Yeah. What jumps out at me as you speak is the need for that human connection, especially when we think about the age of AI that it is that we are and how everything is automated. I was on a call today trying to get support, and as much as I love AI and I love technology, when the chatbot kept asking me questions, I said, can I please just speak with somebody?
Yes.
It asked me for more information and I literally typed in, can I just please speak with the representative?
So true.
Very much, very much.
So that human connection, and that's what we're having today, that human connection that keeps us going, the energy to feed into when everything is going awry. It centers us back.
Certainly does. Couldn't agree more, Yvonne. So thank you. It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. There's so much that our listeners will take away from it. All of the information, even about the view, which I found so valuable as an insight into my leadership style. I'm going to put the link in the show notes and people are going to be able to get more information about it. So thank you for your time today.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Change Leadership Conversations. Be sure to hit the follow button, leave us a review, and share this podcast with your team or fellow change leaders, because leading change is better when we do it together.